And Judge James Boasberg ordered an emergency hearing Friday night to hear arguments from the ACLU.
He himself warns the Trump administration not to violate the Supreme Court's orders
about a temporary restraining order that could potentially slow the Trump administration's use.
The court issued unprecedented, legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule. Photos of TDA members it wants to deport.
This weekend, the United States Supreme Court issued a late-night ruling that reads more like a warning shot at Donald Trump than a procedural decision. The court stepped in to stop the rapid deportation of a group of detainees who had not been given due process.
SCOTUS's decision issued in the early hours of 19 April blocks the deportations of Venezuelan migrants under the 18th century law.
It wasn't just a routine stay, it was a judicial flare shot into the sky, and buried in that ruling. A dissent by none other than Justice Samuel Alito, Trump's ally. Let's take a look.
Justice Samuel Alito issued a blistering dissent to the Supreme Court's decision temporarily blocking the Trump administration from deporting a group of Venezuelan migrants. Alito is calling it, quote, unprecedented and legally questionable relief.
Overnight, Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas releasing their dissent, calling the overnight order from their colleagues unprecedented and legally questionable relief.
They're unilaterally claiming that people are members of a gang, but not giving them the opportunity to go into court and show they're not.
But the Trump administration now saying they have no plans to return him home, despite the Supreme Court ordering them to facilitate his release.
Alito didn't just disagree with the majority. He took the unusual step of reminding the Trump administration in writing that they are not above the law. That's right, even Alito is now publicly pressing Trump to comply with the court. He echoed a foundational principle: the executive must follow the law, no matter who sits in the Oval Office. For a justice long considered ideologically aligned with Trump-era conservatism.
Despite providing no evidence of an alleged association to the courts, he has no criminal convictions and his family denies the allegations.
My mission and my purpose is to make sure that we uphold the rule of law, because if we take it away from him, we do jeopardize it for everybody else.
That's not just a legal position, it's a signal. It centers around Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act, a law dating back to 1798 to rapidly deport immigrants, sidestepping established legal procedures.
You know, our country was the strongest, believe it or not, from 1870 to 1913.
The ACLU and several district courts raised alarms, noting the potential for mass civil rights violations. Trump's team ignored the warnings.
And Judge James Boasberg ordered an emergency hearing Friday night to hear arguments from the ACLU about a temporary restraining order that could potentially slow the Trump administration's use.
The ACLU is asking Boasberg to mandate that across, potentially nationwide, to mandate at least 30 days written notice in English and Spanish for anyone who the Trump administration would deem potentially a member of Tren d'Arc. This comes as the Trump administration is trying to change the tide of how the public perceives him. You saw the president say in the Oval Office today that he is violent, and they're trying to harp on this message.
In some cases, they even appeared to rush deportations before courts could intervene. That's what prompted the Supreme Court's emergency action. Let's take a look.
From the court's decision in the middle of the night to stop the Trump administration from continuing to deport a class of people in the Northern District of Texas.
I refused to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate. Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. Justice Samuel Alito has penned dissent against a recent Supreme Court move to pause U.S. President Donald Trump's deportations of Venezuelan criminals under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. The court advised the White House not to remove Venezuelans held in Texas's Bluebonnet Detention Center until further orders. Trump administration's counsel has filed an opposition to the order. The attorneys said that the federal government gave advance notice to detainees before their deportations.
The majority halted the deportations immediately, but it was Alito's dissent that stood out, though framed as a procedural complaint, arguing the court moved too fast or without full briefing. Alito also included a sharp rebuke Trump must comply, that's betrayal with a velvet glove, a coded message that Trump's usual tactics, legal gray zones, executive overreach, and last-minute maneuvers won't be tolerated here.
The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, had filed an emergency appeal arguing that federal immigration authorities have presumably restarted deportations under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. The law has been invoked only a few times in U.S. history, most recently being during World War II.
Let's dig into the dissent. Alito wrote, "Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law." This may seem basic, but in Trump's political orbit, even the obvious becomes controversial. Alito also lamented how the court had granted unprecedented emergency relief without hearing from the government. Yet buried between the lines was a rare acknowledgement: the government. Trump's government was acting with reckless haste. Let's take a look.
We have followed the Constitution. We have followed law.
The administration also invoked the Alien Enemies Act in March to deport more than 200 Venezuelan migrants to the notorious Secot prison in El Salvador. But the Trump administration now saying they have no plans to return him home, despite the Supreme Court ordering them to facilitate his release.
Translation: Alito sees the game. The Trump team tried to exploit murky legal terrain, leveraging short rulings and vague language to justify sweeping actions. And even Alito, a consistent defender of broad executive power, had enough. This judicial moment didn't happen in a vacuum. It came against the backdrop of new CNN polling showing that 58% of Americans believe Trump should be impeached if he defies the Supreme Court.
58% of America, last time I looked, that was the majority, said that if Donald Trump doesn't obey the United States Supreme Court, he should be impeached.
The question is on adoption of Article 2. The question is on the adoption of Article 2. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
That's a majority across nearly every demographic except his MAGA core. It reflects a public increasingly exhausted by Trump's war on institutions. Independents fleeing. Democrats done. Even Republicans slipping. Trump's support is shrinking down to the hardcore MAGA base, a base that remains loyal but can't carry a general election. His legal troubles are bleeding into his political strength, and now he's losing credibility with the very court he helped shape. Let's not forget, 3 of the sitting Supreme Court justices were appointed by Trump. So for Alito, who predates Trump's presidency, to appear this skeptical signals a possible shift in the internal power dynamics of the court.
Supreme Court, which indicates that even Donald Trump's most ardent supporters, like Justice Alito, don't trust him either. We know the United States Supreme Court is losing patience. We don't trust you. We are deeply skeptical of the positions that you're taking in court. Even Alito reminded Trump that he needs to abide by the United States Supreme Court decision.
This isn't just about immigration policy. It's about constitutional boundaries, respect for the judiciary, and what happens when those lines are crossed. Let's take a look.
Even Alito reminded Trump that he needs to abide by the United States Supreme Court decision. But Trump, you got to comply. I mean, when Alito's saying that, you know there's deep skepticism at the United States Supreme Court.
Behind the scenes, this isn't just about due process. It's about power. Can Trump continue to test the limits of the law without consequence? Can he use executive authority to push through controversial policies under cover of emergency? Alito's dissent suggests those days may be numbered. The fracture is small, but significant. Alito's words aren't a full break with Trump, but they hint at the discomfort brewing beneath the surface. In recent months, even Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh have signaled concern about how the court is perceived. They want no part of a narrative that paints them as Trump's errand boys. Alito's dissent is subtle, but it's a crack, or a fracture in the MAGA monolith. And it tells us even the far-right justices are calculating their post-Trump futures. They see the writing on the wall. Trump's grip on the party may be strong, but his grip on the judiciary is weakening. The legal issue at the center of this drama involves the government's attempted removal of detainees who are part of a yet-to-be-certified class action. The Supreme Court's majority said stop. Alito said fine. However, even in saying that, he acknowledged something Trump didn't want to hear: that the executive branch is still bound by the court's previous orders, however murky they might have been. And that's what makes this moment explosive.
Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. The executive must proceed under the terms of our order in Trump versus JGG, and this court should follow established procedures. The government is directed not to remove any members of the putative class of detainees from the U.S. until further order of the court. Shortly after midnight yesterday, the court hastily and prematurely granted unprecedented emergency relief. The court ordered the government not to remove a putative class of detainees until this court issues another order.
Alito, often aligned with Thomas in defending conservative executive power, is now offering a public reminder that there are lines even Trump cannot cross. He's no longer echoing the MAGA talking points about a weaponized judiciary. He's returning to an older, institutionalist conservatism, one that values precedent, order, and legal clarity. Let's take a look.
He said he was going to dissent over the 1 a.m. emergency stay issued by the United States Supreme Court, in which it effectively told the Trump administration with a wagging finger, you are not to deport anybody out of the Northern District of Texas to El Salvador or anywhere else until we tell you so. Now, Alito files his 5-pager, which is just holding up his end of the bargain. But I think the most interesting thing of it is he himself warns the Trump administration not to violate the Supreme Court's orders.
The Supreme Court will soon issue another decision that could define how deportation, due process, and presidential power intersect. The last time this happened, it led to legal chaos. Some detainees were removed to El Salvador in the dead of night without proper legal review. In response, the ACLU scrambled to file habeas petitions in multiple jurisdictions. What happened next could be described as a procedural nightmare. Conflicting court rulings. Judges issuing temporary stays while the federal government fueled planes. Legal teams rushing to stop removals in real time. It all culminated in the Supreme Court stepping in, a move that, as Alito's dissent revealed, even the most conservative justices found uncomfortable. Now the court has a chance to clarify, and Trump's allies are bracing for impact. Because vague orders have become his favorite loophole. But the court, they're learning fast. If their last ruling was too ambiguous, their next one may spell it out with brutal clarity. When Justice Samuel Alito, the ideological bulldog of the rights, starts warning you to follow the law. That's not loyalty, that's a lifeboat. It's a subtle but unmistakable move to distance himself from the chaos. And as more rulings drop, more cracks will form. Because this time, even the justices are tired. They've seen enough. They've read the filings, they've watched the lower courts struggle to contain a presidency that treats the law like an obstacle course. Alito's dissent is a warning, the guardrails are still there. And if Trump crashes through them again, the consequences may be swifter than he expects.
Can't you give us some sort of order, temporary restraining order on notice? Because these notices they were given were in English, not Spanish. Both the executive and judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. By writ of habeas corpus, everybody be given proper notice and an opportunity to be heard in court by a federal judge before they're loaded into planes.